Hey guys, RanterInShades here, exercising my first to memorize vlog style, fresh with my first actual haircut since the quarantine. Anyway, it's time for another episode of What's Wrong With.
What's wrong with me? You wanna know what's wrong with me? I can ask you the exact same thing. What's wrong with me?
This is going to be another one of those videos where I'm going to be taking you back to the very early stages of my music listening life. I've mentioned in my What's Wrong With on the Beatles that the very first CD I ever owned was their compilation album 1. This What's Wrong With is going to be about the first band I ever called my favorite, Green Day. So let me set the stage. When I was a kid, there were always songs I enjoyed hearing whenever they would come on the radio, but I didn't exactly have a favorite band. Sure, I liked the Beatles, but I'm not sure I'd say they were my favorite band at the time, because outside of when my mom played One in the car, they weren't exactly a band I went out of my way to listen to and learn more about, and I'd yet to really begin actually exploring music. Listening to music and learning about bands wasn't exactly a priority of mine throughout most of elementary school, but around late 2004, early 2005 would be when that began to change. I had heard of Green Day prior, but they didn't exactly make the best first impression on me. See, I used to set my alarm to play an adult contemporary / soft rock station called Magic 106.7, and they would sometimes play Good Riddance, Time of Your Life, and I would of course also hear it played at both of my older cousins' high school graduations, because of course. I kinda hated the song, and honestly, I still do. I'd always found acoustic songs boring as a kid, but even outside of that, I found the song lame. So the year's 2004. I'm in 5th grade and turning 10 very soon. The group of guys at school I called my friend group at the time were raving about a new album that had been released called American Idiot by Green Day. And I'm thinking,
Green Day? You mean that same band that does that lame Time of Your Life song?
yes, that Green Day. So I had a friend, well, his mom, burn me a copy of American Idiot because I wanted to see what the hype was about. And I was in love. I'd never heard music quite like this in my life. I thought this was the loudest and heaviest music ever, and that Green Day were the best band ever for making it. Obviously, that sounds really cringy to say a decade and a half later as a 26-year-old who listens to a lot of metal, but that's honest to God what I thought as a naive 10-year-old kid. Needless to say, Green Day became the first band I went out of my way to listen to, and thus they became my favorite band. I developed a very intimate relationship with American Idiot, and it's still an album I consider a favorite. I might not be the craziest about some of the songs like Are We the Waiting, Extraordinary Girl, and Wake Me Up When September Ends, but every other song on the album I loved, especially Jesus of Suburbia. Clocking in at 9 minutes, that song is an absolutely magnificent collection of 5 micro songs establishing the character Jesus of Suburbia. Billy Joe Armstrong actually described the song as being their Bohemian Rhapsody, and thus it's my favorite song on the album, only second to a song I'll bring up shortly. My family had also just gotten iTunes for our computer, and I of course had my shitty little 1GB iPod Shuffle at this time. And later on, after playing the songs to death, I decided to go on iTunes and check out more of Green Day's work. I wasn't really blown away by Nimrod and Warning, as I found those to be a bit poppy compared to what I liked on American Idiot, but I enjoyed 39 Smooth, Kerplunk, and Insomniac, and Dookie would go on to top American Idiot as being my favorite album of theirs to this day, containing my favorite song of theirs, Welcome to Paradise. And just like with the Beatles and Red Hot Chili Peppers, throughout my musical exploration, Green Day always stuck around and maintained a special place with me, even when Alter Bridge went on to become my favorite band. I wouldn't say their style is super distinct from other pop-punk bands, even from their time, but it's fun stuff nonetheless. The early albums have a vintage down-home vibe to them, and the bands sound like a group of kids that just want to jam out, tell some stories, and not care if shit gets broken in the process. And on American Idiot, you can tell they wanted to retain that vibe even when they had a higher budget to work with. And of course, with that album, it's a whole rock opera about an angry anti-hero and his coming-of-age journey that pretty much matches the big sound on the album. So now let's talk about the members, starting with Trey Cool. He is such a bombastic drummer. He's not only tight with his grooves, but I've always really liked his fills, especially in the faster songs. He brings a lot of energy to the band, and that's why I've always admired him as a drummer. And of course, being that I started my drum lessons around the time I'd gotten into Green Day, listening to his drumming really helped push me in that department. Mike Dirnt I've gone on record calling one of my favorite bassists. Along with Steve Harris of Iron Maiden and Joe Principe of Rise Against, he's someone I reference right away when I think about bassists whose styles have rubbed off on me when it comes to composing bass lines. One of my favorite things to do when listening to early Green Day is listen to Mike Dirnt's bass lines and the little tangents he goes off on, very akin to Steve Harris. Of the 3 members, he's definitely my favorite for that reason, even if he commits the cardinal sin of playing with a pick. And finally, Billy Joe Armstrong. I always thought he had a very recognizable voice, but as a guitarist, I kind of view him as sort of average. He could certainly play rhythm well and throw in a bit of technicality with his riffs, but I'm not exactly the craziest about his lead work. I will say this part of the solo in Jesus of Suburbia during the Tales of Another Broken Home portion is my favorite lead moment from him. I'm not saying he's a shitty player, because he isn't. I just personally like him as a vocalist better than I do a guitarist. But regardless, Green Day's music did have a hand in making me want to learn guitar, so I'll always have some appreciation there, kinda like how I feel about AC/DC. Now it's time to debunk the flag. I suppose one place to start would be with briefly talking about my thoughts on their output following American Idiot. 21st Century Breakdown I always saw as a bit of a letdown, but not awful. The triple album Uno Dos and Tre I thought was a mess. Revolution Radio I thought was an alright return to form, and as for Father of All Motherfuckers, I feel about that album similar to how I feel about 21st Century Breakdown. Not the worst I've heard from Green Day, but kind of a letdown, and an album I consider to be one of their weaker efforts. They obviously don't stack up well against albums like Dookie and American Idiot, but I'm always interested in where they go musically, and I'm always hopeful their stuff can at least be listenable. Green Day don't strike me as a band that's out of touch with what people like hearing from them, so although I don't disagree that their newer stuff isn't as good as their older stuff, they aren't the kind of band that I haven't
It's time to stop!
kind of outlook with. This leads to one of the biggest talking points with Green Day, that they sold out or stopped being punk. I can agree that they've become much more commercial over the last couple decades, but I don't view their newer stuff as being a huge stretch from their early stuff musically or even lyrically. Stuff like the American Idiot Broadway musical and the Green Day rock band do seem a bit excessive, and I remember thinking that at the time, but they have maintained their punk roots. Plus, like I've said in the Sellin' Out video, it's not like a band like Green Day was ever against the idea of their music getting more exposure and acclaim, and I'm not sure there's evidence that suggests that. Probably the best example of them maintaining their punk roots is this infamous clip from their performance at the iHeartRadio Music Festival in 2012.
Fuck this shit. I'm gonna play a fucking new song. Fuck this shit. Give me a fucking break. 1 minute left. 1 minute fucking left. You're gonna give me fucking 1 minute? Look at that fucking sign right there. 1 minute. Let me tell you something. I've been around since fucking 1980 fucking 8. And you're gonna give me 1 fucking minute? You gotta be fucking kidding me. I'm not fucking Justin Bieber, you motherfuckers. This is a fucking joke. I got 1 minute, 1 minute left. Oh, now I got nothing left. Let me show you what 1 fucking minute fucking means. One minute. God fucking love you all. We'll be back.
If that isn't punk, I don't know what is. I remember seeing that clip and being like, they've still got it. It might be a funny meltdown, but it shows they've still got the punk spirit even this far into their career, and sends a message that they didn't waste their time and become another casualty of society. But if we're wanting to be strictly musical when talking about what being punk is, I again don't see a huge stretch. What punk essentially boils down to is power chords, chunky bass work, and loud, fast-paced drumming, either blast beats, tom grooves, or just generally fast stuff. It's not as technical as metal unless you venture into hardcore, which is basically kind of a bridge between the two, or even listen to some Bayside or some 41, but that's generally how I define punk. This is also why I've never had an elitist outlook about pop punk, saying it's not true punk or something like what the metal elitists say about glam, new metal, and metalcore. But regardless, as much as Green Day's newer material might not do a lot for me, it still has those general characteristics of punk. The other main criticism that Green Day tends to get is going to be a continuation from the What's Wrong With on Rage Against the Machine. Yep, we're going to be talking about politics some more.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Though the issue people take isn't so much with their political views, it's more so with just the fact that they're even political at all. And that's the main issue with this complaint, because if you've noticed, Green Day have been political for pretty much their whole career. Complaining about that is like complaining about Ailstorm singing about pirates or Adam Neely playing the lick. It's what they do. On American Idiot in particular, the title track is basically about George W. Bush. There's also this line in Jesus of Suburbia during the I Don't Care portion. Along with pretty much the whole bridge and Holiday with the Bush jabbing. It's really nothing new for Green Day. So I feel like the people that complain about Green Day being political nowadays, that they've gone SJW, are oblivious at best and ignorant at worst. Even as a kid I knew they hated Bush, so I wasn't exactly ignorant to that. But even then, the only political opinion I really had at the time was,
I don't like that we're being sent to war. Also, George Bush looks like a monkey.
I was way too young to comprehend the political meanings of their music, let alone politics in general, but it was something I picked up on and would go on to better understand it as I got older and more analytical of the music I listened to. So when Billy Joe started ranting about Trump at their shows in 2016, I felt about that pretty much exactly how I felt about Buddy Nielsen, that although he has the right to believe what he wants to believe, I'm unsure if this is the place for it. And if I'm being honest, that's why I've been holding off on seeing Green Day live for the longest time. There is a part of me that's interested in seeing the Hella Mega Tour that they're doing with Weezer. and Fall Out Boy, but I suppose that'll depend on how things turn out this November, since I did find out the tour was postponed to next year because of this fucking virus. Either way, like I said, it's nothing new for Green Day. Another thing to understand is that punk as a genre is rooted in anti-authoritarianism and disliking of conservatives. So when I said that Green Day retained their punk roots, I meant that ideologically too, not just musically or in terms of their general attitude. With that in mind, it shouldn't be a surprise that they, along with most punk bands, would be very openly liberal. It's kind of a thing from the get-go. Listen to a band like Dead Kennedys and you'll definitely be able to pick up on that. Even then, just because they're liberal doesn't mean that they're necessarily SJWs, which is something that I outlined in my anti-elitists or SJWs video. Green Day might be outspokenly liberal and hate Trump, but I'm not a Trump supporter either. You're gonna say that makes me an SJW tard?
No.
So why is it different with Green Day? Plus, look at a band like NoFX. They're liberal and they incorporate some edgy humor into their sets that I wouldn't exactly call PC. Such be the case with that joke about the Vegas shooting they made that got them kicked from the Camp Puck and Drublic Fest in 2018 that I made a video about. Could it be different with Green Day? Sure. But you know what they say about assuming.
Say the line.
Shades.
Nah, I don't really feel like it.
In the What's Wrong With on Rage Against the Machine, I brought up Straight from the Path and War on Women as examples of bands that carry out a hard left message in their music in a not good and quite cringy manner. Green Day, along with bands like Bad Religion and Rise Against, among others, as openly liberal as they are definitely not on that level, and thus I don't feel at all alienated as a centrist. And like I also said in the What's Wrong With on Rage Against the Machine, even if they were harsher with their views within the music or otherwise, it's not like the music itself can't be enjoyable for what it is. That's pretty much all I have to say about Green Day. I might not be the most super left guy out there, but I honestly can't bring myself to dislike Green Day for that reason in particular, nor can I bring myself to dislike them for being more commercial or putting out some albums I don't really care for. They're still a band that means a good deal to me, and American Idiot is still an album I hold very near and dear to my heart, especially because if not for them, I wouldn't have gotten into not just pop punk, but loud rock music in general. So now here's the part at the end of the video where I ask you, the viewer, what's wrong with Green Day? Please be rational when leaving your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you for watching this video, take care, and have a nice day. I'm Shades, and I'll see you next time.